Okay, runners, we are at the point in the program where we're going to start talking about speed and about pace. Now, this is relevant whether it's your first race or your second race, third race, fourth race, because it's really important that we learn to pace ourselves when you first start taking your distance further. But if you've done a couple of races, you might also be wanting to look at how you improve your speed and improve your pace. So I'm going to go through two aspects of it. I'm going to go through the basics of how you work out how to pace yourself for a certain time. So if you're aiming for a certain time with your next race, I will show you how to do that. That's the straightforward bit. Then I'm also going to show you how to analyze the splits when you've done a run and you want to work on your speed of your total run. I've even got a whiteboard for the occasion. So first of all, we're going to have a look at working out how to pace yourself if you want to do your race in a certain time. So here I have for you 10k sub 1 hour, half marathon sub 2 hour. Now that's not because you need to aim for those particular times, that's just because they're nice straightforward round numbers. So it's quite simple to work out. It's not necessarily so simple to execute, so we'll go through that. If you're looking at monitoring your time and getting a certain time in the race, you're going to need to be using a watch, a running watch when you do it, or you can do it with a phone, but it's a bit more fumbly to pick your phone up and look at it all the time. If you're using a running watch, you will be able to enable it in the settings to tell you every either kilometre or mile, depending on what you have your watch set in, what you just did that last kilometre or mile in terms of times. So here's the basic sums for you. If I want to do a 10k in less than an hour, there's 60 minutes in an hour, so I divide my 60 minutes by my 10 kilometres, and that means I need to run 6-minute kilometres. Now that doesn't mean that you're going to run every single kilometre at exactly 6 minutes, because it's never an exact science. This is also where you need to take into account the undulations of the route that you're doing. So if you're doing a very hilly route, then obviously you need to take into account that you might have a particularly hilly kilometre that is a little bit slower, but then you might have a nice downhill kilometre where you make back some of that speed. Just to give you another example, I've got here, if I want to do a half marathon, sub 2 hours, that's 2 hours, 120 minutes divided by 21 kilometres, which is the distance of a half marathon, gives me 5.7 minute kilometres. Or if you want to work it out in miles, it's 120 minutes divided by 13.1 miles, which is the distance of a half marathon, which is 9.2 minute miles. So what you're then going to do is while you're running, every time your watch buzzes at every kilometre, you're just going to glance at it and you're going to have a look. If I'm doing my 10k and I'm aiming for 6-minute miles and I look at my watch and my first minute mile is, 6-minute kilometres, my first kilometre is 4 minutes, then unless I'm much fitter than this goal, then that's going to be too fast for me and I'm going to run out of gas by the end. So I'm going to slow off for my second kilometre and try and average out to that 6k. Also, if you look at your watch and panic and you go, oh no, that was a 7-minute kilometre, you know you can start to speed it up. But you've got enough time to do so because you look at it after 1 kilometre. If you just look at your watch 1 or 2 kilometres from the end of the race, it's too late if you're a couple of minutes behind to make up that time. So I literally just have a quick look every kilometre. I have my watch in kilometres and I know what my average is. If I'm doing a hilly race and I know it was a particularly hilly kilometre and I've gone over whatever minute kilometre I want to do, I just go, okay, fine, it was hilly, but I know I've got a couple of downhills coming up and I'm going to need to up the speed so that I can work out my average pace. It is about averages, but that's where splits come into it, which we're going to have a look at in a second. So if you just want to work out what speed you need to go in order to get a time, that is how you do it. You simply divide the time by the number of miles or kilometres you're doing it, but you then need to have a look at your watch to work it out. Okay, so next we move on to our splits. Ta-da! So when you analyse your run on your phone or your smartwatch after you've done it, you will get a list of splits that looks something like this. Numbers obviously will vary. Now I've just used a 10k for illustration purposes of this, but the same applies however far you are going. Doesn't matter if it's a 5k, half marathon, full marathon. So it will show you each kilometre or each mile, depending on how you've got it set, and what minute, kilometre or mile you're doing. So in this instance, I've got it set in kilometres. It will probably also give you an average speed, which is really helpful, and a total amount of time that you've been running. So you can learn a lot just from using common sense, looking at all these numbers. So in this example, my first kilometre is a 4.9 minute kilometre. My second one is a 7.1 minute kilometre. It doesn't take a genius to realise I've started quite fast there and then I've slowed down quite a lot for my second kilometre. Now that might be because I looked at my watch and I went, whoa, that was too fast, and I've slowed myself down. It's really good to look at your splits as soon as you can after your run. It doesn't have to be immediate, but preferably the same day, so that you can have a think about why they might be a certain way. For example, if you go, well, we got to here, kilometre 5, and it was a 7.2, that's because there was a massive hill there. But then we got a nice big downhill, and that's why I sped up. It's really difficult to analyse it if you wait too long because you forget about those things. You forget where you stopped to tie your shoelaces, or where there was a particularly big hill, or where someone stopped you and asked you for the time. And sometimes those things are just out of your control. Now, in an absolute ideal perfect world, on a completely flat run, your splits are all exactly the same. So in the instance of this 10 kilometre that I want to do in sub 1 hour, all of these say 6 minute kilometre, bang on the nail, then I do it in an hour. Maybe I'll have a little sprint finish to get sub 1 hour. But obviously, there are very few races that are completely flat, and therefore that can't happen. So it's important that you have a look at them and then you think about strategies. So not knowing this person or the data, I might look and say, do you think perhaps you started a little bit too fast there? Yeah, I was really enthusiastic. I'd had my pre-workout and I went for it, or it was a downhill start and I just went hell for leather. And then we can have a look, like I said, where the hills were, but also how things average out. You want them to be as similar as possible so that you're running at a similar pace. The average is also really useful if you get overwhelmed by numbers and it feels too much. If you're aiming for 6 minute kilometres to get your 10k in under an hour, and your average is 6.09, then that tells you straight off you're very, very close to doing that. You're just 0.9 over. In which case, if you don't want to analyse it any more than that, you just need to go a teeny bit quicker and you'll hit that sub 1 hour. I hope that makes sense. So you can completely overanalyze it, or you can just have a little bit of a look at your average, maybe have a glance over these and see, did I start really fast, did I start really slow, and just have a little look at the numbers and where you think you can make improvements, where you think you can make changes, what's realistic, what isn't. If you look at this and actually you wanted to go for a sub 50 minute 10k and you're disappointed in that, then I would look at more than just the numbers. I would look at your training. So making sure you're getting your hill sprints in, your run fit in, and you're monitoring your times a little bit more closely. If you're not that bothered about the time and that's not your goal, for example, if your goal is to just get around the race without walking, then don't worry about any of this. Just ignore and make sure that you've got ready the chat you need to have with the voice on your shoulder, the devil on your shoulder that's going to tell you to walk in the race, because don't know about you, but for me that's always there. And that's what I need then, that chat to just remind me, don't walk because you'll be disappointed with yourself at the end. That's what gets me through, and then I'm pleased with myself that I didn't walk. However, if I'm going to be disappointed with my time, I must be checking my watch. So I hope that makes sense. If you've got any questions about your splits, feel free to ask us, and all the best with working with your speed.